We're going to be going to our keynote, interoperability, with Chris Tyler.
Howdy.
And you got a little extra time, Chris, so take your time.
Fantastic, right? So I originally had some slides to go through. I'll just walk you through and let's have a talk about what I was going to run through. Just wanted to welcome everybody. I'm pleased to be here. I thank you to everybody for having me out. Welcome to everybody. I just wish we could have all been together, right? I'm a big outdoorsman, so I would have loved to have gotten up to Wyoming and spend some time up there. But just by way of introduction, because I'm probably not as well known as Charles and Caitlin and those there, but my name is Chris Tyler, and I'm the Chief Technology Officer for Blockspaces. For those of you not familiar with Blockspaces, we're a software company based out of Tampa, Florida. And we focus on bridging the gap between all of that promising value that we've heard about of blockchain and distributed ledger technology and the networks, and the participant companies that are desperately needed to ensure the success of those networks, right? And they're going to be the ones that really benefit from participating. I'm also a 15-year veteran of IBM analytics and data science. Spent the last 3 or 4 years working with IBM blockchain. And over the course of my nearly 30 years, I'm getting pretty old. I've worked with a lot of big data and analytics, software and services, and I've built some of the world's largest databases and world's largest systems. And I feel like that's all prepared me for this day, right, of working in blockchain, because I really understand the value of data. Right? Additionally, over the past 5+ years, I've served on the board of a nonprofit software company as their chief analytics officer. And at ALS Never Surrender, we're developing apps that collect and analyze ALS patient progression data and to help assist researchers better understand that disease, which currently has no cure. So, and since about 2016, when I was introduced to blockchain, I've seen so many companies that make significant investments into blockchain technology and gone well beyond proofs of concept. And those use cases that I've seen are, across many industries and business processes, things like supply chain management, physician credentialing, digital and cross-border payments, insurance claims processing, digital rights management, and so many more, right? It's amazing the different use cases that keep coming up for applying this technology. And innovation around the blockchain network creation and management is accelerated tremendously. And I applaud all the things Wyoming's doing and the organizations within Wyoming to truly accelerate that. With the support of all the organizations that I've been a part of, right, and both big and small, I've worked with some, 3 guys in a garage all the way up to very large enterprises. But we've seen multiple successful networks emerged to facilitate business transactions. And, I work primarily in enterprise blockchain. And so supply chain, I think Joel mentioned it, right? It's one of the biggest use cases in enterprise blockchain. And IBM Food Trust is one of those that's in the food supply chain. And it's one of the fastest growing, if not the fastest growing, non-cryptocurrency blockchain network. And there's another one, Ripe.io. They're very similar blockchain networks they use to track and trace products, produce, perishable goods, and so forth, from the farm to the table. I have hundreds of participants along the food supply chain. They're tracking hundreds and thousands of products and millions of transactions each day, each year, so forth. And the data that's being collected, right, and data stored in the blockchain is being used to improve food safety, reduce food waste, manage inventory for food freshness, and decrease costs in the participants that are using this technology. Similarly, MetaLedger is being used to help participants in the pharmaceutical industry comply with recent regulations around track and trace, all designed to improve patient safety and drug supply security, as well as streamline the payment processing along the value chain. And we also work with, it's called Trust Your Supplier. It's in the supply chain industry as well. It helps marry suppliers and buyers to create a network focused around demand-driven, just-in-time supply chain. Also letting non-traditional suppliers easily enter new markets. And we saw that as being very critical at the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, where companies like Ford began making ventilators, and you had clothing manufacturers creating N95 masks and trying to supply that to an industry that didn't know them, right? So things like digital credentials were critical in making sure you knew who they were and that they were trusted, as well as having visibility into the supply chain, right? What did they have on hand? What was needed, and so forth. And that solution is helping get the necessary supplies of PPE to the people who needed them most and as quickly as possible. And like I mentioned, my experience is primarily in enterprise blockchain, but my Blockspace's peers, right, my team, we have a deep-rooted experience in the realm of digital currencies and decentralized identity. Dating back to 2012, the co-founders have worked on many cryptocurrency and decentralized ID projects. They're highly sought after as advisors on the adoption of blockchain technologies in both business as well as building the future thought leaders around blockchain through university and primary school education programs. So my background's in enterprise blockchain, but as a company, Blockspaces has a total blockchain focus, right? And I was pleased to hear, Joel previously, that they have sort of that, they're working with Hyperledger. They're also working with the digital currency side. So I'm excited to see that. And I'm also excited about all the recent developments here in the blockchain world, like Kraken winning that special purpose depository institution designation, right? You also see things like WeTrade is another blockchain that I've worked with, right? That is a consortium of 16 banks across 15 countries, facilitates international trade finance. And then finally, that recent acquisition of Quorum by Consensus is extremely promising for DeFi, right? So then you look at some of the newer use cases in blockchain around decentralized digital identities and self-sovereign identity management. Companies like Evernym, Sovereign, and Microsoft developing networks for managing those digital IDs and digital credentials. A lot of promise there, and these networks are, allowing authorized individuals and organizations to verify and invalidate credentials, as well as allowing people to own their identity, people and organizations to own their own identity. And you look at big players like IBM and Microsoft are focusing in on this area as well. ION, built on the Bitcoin network and driven by Microsoft, is a huge step for the application of public blockchain in such a critical and secure function like identity management. I believe that the ultimate success of blockchain depends on simplifying the integration of these and other blockchain networks, both public and private, permissionless, within business processes across the entire business ecosystem, right? So making it seamless to get on and off the blockchain, to interact with the blockchain networks and so forth. And most of these successful implementations of blockchain networks have been primarily within the early adopters, right? But in order for them to sustain that success and continue to grow, more participants are needed. And there's a recent white paper, I'm sure most people have read it, right, by the World Economic Forum and Deloitte. And it was noted that blockchain solutions have been formed around these existing small ecosystems. But when you look at these global trade supply chains and you look at the business world today, right, they intersect with multiple ecosystems. So you got to get a broad footprint of people interacting in these networks to continue to see them succeed. I mentioned earlier the success that we've seen with IBM Food Trust. And as successful as it has been, one of the founding members, Walmart, still only has about 400 SKUs tracked on that blockchain, right? And only their primary suppliers of a handful of products are actively participating. And their senior director of global food safety at Walmart was on an IBM event recently, and he was asked, what are the challenges you see with growing that network participation? Pardon me. And he said that their biggest challenge is getting on board the small, mid-sized farms and distributors, and branching out beyond their primary sphere of influence. And I always say that the power and value of a blockchain resides in the strength of the ecosystem. And the more participation from a wider audience of members just simply enhances the data and the trust in the system. Okay. So then we see there are many factors contributing to the lack of participation of organizations and blockchains. A lot of the blockchain technologies is still fairly immature. The UIs for most of these blockchain networks they're very limited, and in most cases, the only way to interact with the blockchain is through a set of APIs. Well, this all but eliminates the usability of the networks by many small or mid-sized businesses that they just don't have the resources to use an API. Right? And in most cases, even the UIs that are delivered, they're not sufficient, they're too cumbersome and time-consuming to use, totally blowing away any efficiencies that they're promised by participating in the network. So there also needs to be these measurable incentives. And again, I think Joel mentioned this, right? You got to have these incentives for all participants. And while this is typically seen through financial incentives, such as reduced costs, reduced risks, and improved efficiencies, it can also take the form of visibility to data. And this is where a lot of my data and analytics background comes in, is the value of data, the ability to monetize data. And so I've seen, like in the art world, the visibility to where that artist's work currently resides. Who owns it? How has the value increased over time or appreciated over time? Provides valuable insights into that artist, right? In the agricultural world, right? Being able to see where their product is being consumed and sold, and ensuring that it was handled appropriately, all the way to the consumer, is extremely valuable to the farmers, right? And as successful as we've seen Bitcoin, right? There's still limited outlets to purchase goods and services with Bitcoin. And a recent survey I read showed that only about 11% of Americans own and transact the most well-known digital currency in the world. And while we're seeing improvements with more and more applications and systems and companies accepting digital currencies, it's still fairly challenging in the business world to participate in those networks. And if participants cannot easily and seamlessly leverage the networks, right, the networks are going to continue to struggle. And access and visibility to the blockchain network within current systems and processes is desperately needed in order to lower the barriers to entry for all members of the value chain. So, how do we start to address some of the challenges with access and usability? And it starts with the great work being done by companies like Hyperledger and Consensus, Chainlink, Cosmos, Cardano, Polkadot, and of course, us at Blockspaces, right? These organizations and many others are working on interoperability and integration in blockchain. And these two words, interoperability and integration, are often used interchangeably, but I see them as very different approaches and addressing different challenges. In that white paper that I mentioned earlier, right, even the Deloitte and World Economic Forum, they distinguish between the two as what they call digital asset exchange and arbitrary data exchange. And I see interoperability is focused on being able to represent my digital assets in multiple blockchain networks while ensuring that it's still just one asset, right? Not copies of the asset. And as an example, in the agricultural space, a farm may be a member of one network, the Ripe.io network, and they may post inventory of their fresh blueberries, while there's a local market that wants to buy fresh produce, right? But they're a member of the IBM Food Trust Network, and so they don't have visibility to that. But if I could easily make those assets interoperable between those two networks, now that that local market would see that, hey, there's some fresh blueberries just 30 minutes away, and be able to transact on those, right? And that inventory would then be marked sold and visible to everybody in the network and so forth. There's interoperability projects being developed like Hyperledger Cactus and others that would provide that visibility across those blockchain networks. Similar interoperability is being worked on in digital currencies as well. Being able to, for holders of Bitcoin, to be able to represent those holdings on an Ethereum network and transact and those assets through an Ethereum DApp. I believe interoperability is going to be critical to that mass adoption of digital currencies, and will be especially beneficial in business processes like decentralized finance. I look at integration, on the other hand, is more around combining the strengths of disparate systems and networks to facilitate transactions. And again, going back to that agricultural example, if Green Acres Farm, if that farm posts their inventory of fresh blueberries onto the Food Trust Network, when that local market wants to acquire that, right, that transaction on the Food Trust Network could trigger a transaction on the Consensus Quorum network and have that payment go back to the farm, right, or any of the other companies that are involved in that transaction that need to be paid. And you see, chain-to-chain interaction could minimize some of the work that's needed to be done on the systems integration side, but it still poses some challenges to the principles of blockchain by integrating on-chain processes with off-chain systems. However, companies like Chainlink and others are working on, on-chain integrations with trusted data providers through oracles. And that could be a very promising solution for this chain-to-chain integration. Integration also involves the ability to seamlessly integrate these blockchain technologies into current business processes and current systems, right? There's still a lot of complexities that are involved in integrating these blockchain networks into those processes. And to a business, the blockchain is there to augment their existing systems and processes, providing visibility to the provenance and transaction histories to all the participants. This builds efficiencies and increases trust among all members. And since it's there to augment, not replace, these organizations don't want to engage in duplicate data entry, as that introduces risks and cost. And a lot of small and mid-sized enterprises just simply don't have the development resources to implement complex blockchain integrations. This is the area that Blockspaces is focusing on. We're developing a solution to make it easier for all members of the value chain to participate in these blockchain networks using their existing systems and processes, and help them receive the full value that they're promised by participating. We're delivering plug and play connectors to common systems such as your leading ERPs and CRMs and IoT devices and more, as well as connectors to leading blockchain networks and DApps. We feel this will allow all companies to easily tap into the ecosystem and reap the benefits that's offered to all the participants. So, I've worked in embedded analytics for over 15 years and have always believed that analytics is most easily and most effective when it's consumed at the point of decision. And the same is true for blockchain. Since I began working in blockchain, I've seen the promise it holds to decentralize control over processes and data, and the promise it holds to give back control to those who truly own their data. And I believe this is a disruptive technology. And I advise organizations to not simply replicate their current processes into a blockchain, but instead look at how can they leverage it for its strengths? How can we reimagine how processes can be improved by providing visibility, sharing access, while putting transparent controls in place with smart contracts? But to truly experience the transformative power of blockchain, all parties in these business processes have to be able to participate, not simply sit on the sidelines and watch. We, as early adopters, right, we have to help them, those that can benefit the most from the application of this technology. But they can't do it by themselves. Additionally, there's no one blockchain that's going to solve all the problems. Each technology and each network solves a specific need. Where Blockspace is we need to solve for the challenge of easily connecting these networks and integrating these transparent controls into existing systems and processes. The promise of blockchain cannot be realized without a lot of different participants. And potential participants can't play if they can't get in the game. And we at Blockspaces and all of us as a blockchain community need to continue to work towards making this technology simpler to adopt for organizations of all sizes. So that's a little about my passion is in, how do we get as many people using the blockchain networks as possible? So any questions?
I think we're good.
Okay. I'd like to thank everybody for participating in this and thank the organizers again for having me here, and everyone enjoy their event. And I look forward to hopefully being back next year in person. So,
Awesome. Well, we really appreciate it, Mr. Tyler. Thank you very much. Oh,
Yep.
We got a question?